Hey, what's up? It's Austin here with Falter Media Company, and today I'm going to talk about 7 tips to editing audio in Premiere Pro. So let's jump right in. My editing tip number 1 is stay organized. First of all, when you import audio from a wedding or a project, I would totally recommend putting them in separate folders. It saves me so much time not having to dig around for that one audio file that's hidden among a bunch of video files. And so stay organized that way, but then once you have it in your timeline, right click and use the labels function to color code different types of audio. For example, a lot of times I will color code the ceremony audio different from the speeches audio, different from the music file that I'm using, and all of that helps me stay organized. Also, it just looks really cool in a timeline. Tip number 2 is use the right effect in Adobe Premiere Pro. There's 3 different types of fade, and you should know what they do. There is constant gain, constant power, and exponential fade. Constant gain is just super gradual. It's like a straight line. Exponential fade fades out on a curve, but it's a little faster. And then constant power fades out on a curve the opposite direction, so it's a little slower. So the default is constant power, and I use it 90% of the time. It's a bit more gradual, and you can't really tell that there's a jump cut going on. Another effect I use most frequently with ambient sounds especially is the pitch shifter. If I have a song that ends on a specific note and then I'm using like an ambient sound at the end, and it's a different pitch, sometimes I'll actually change the pitch to just kind of match it and mesh, and feels like it's one soundtrack rather than jumping between songs.
Now, don't go crazy with it. It's really easy to get carried away.
Wouldn't recommend it.
It can really mess with your audio too, but pitch shifter, it's good to know what it does. Tip number 3 is actually using audio shortcuts. Basically, if you highlight all your clips in the timeline, and then if you're on a Mac, you press Command-Shift-D or Control-Shift-D if you're on a PC, and it will automatically apply constant power, which is the default effect, to the beginning and end of every audio clip that you highlighted. Now, it sure beats dragging and dropping the constant power to the beginning or end of every clip. Tip number 4 is use audio keyframes. Basically, if you expand a track in your timeline, you should see an option to add keyframes. If there's a spot in your timeline where you have an audio track that needs to be louder than the music, for example, you can add a few keyframes in easily and drag them up and down to your liking. Well, I did a wedding recently, and here's the audio how it turned out.
Dear Mallory, I cannot even really begin to describe all the feelings that I have for you.
All right, tip number 5, get to know the audio panel and what you can do there. I use the audio panel most often with dialogue. When I was on my old microphone or just on a shotgun mic for interviews and it really didn't come out good or there's background sound, I used this panel to help with the white noise when I had that. You really want to pay attention to the difference it makes in your audio before you use a ton of it. Using too much can make the audio sound like a bad cell phone signal. But for those occasions when you need a little bit of help, I totally recommend using that feature. Tip number 6, use the synchronize function. Premiere Pro has a nifty little feature called synchronize. Basically, you highlight 2 clips that are from the same room or using the same audio relatively, you can sync them all together. So I can sync my lapel mic with my camera's internal microphone, and then it'll match with the footage. Now, I have found that it doesn't always work, and sometimes I do have to visually line things up, which is annoying, but it's there when it does work. Tip number 7, isolate the video from the audio. You can isolate the video from the audio by clicking the unlink tool that will allow you to make changes to the audio separate from the video. So for example, if you expand the audio out past where the video is, you can still hear the audio and it won't affect the length of your video clip. Certain tools like speeding clips up will sometimes affect the audio, and in instances where you don't want that, by unlinking your video from your audio, you can avoid those changes. Those are my 7 main tips for editing audio in Premiere Pro. Now, if these tips are helpful, I'd love it if you subscribe. I'm just getting started with YouTube, but there's a lot more to come. And before I go, I want to give you a bonus tip. I see a lot of videos on YouTube about video transitions, but audio transitions are just as important. Think about High School Dance when like the song fades out and the slow song fades out and then it's a fast song and it's just super awkward. Nobody knows what to do. That's the type of thing you want to avoid with audio transitions. One thing that I'm always trying to do when I'm transitioning from one song to another is either have some sort of an ambient noise, background noise, or something else that can mask it out. Last week I did a wedding edit, and at the beginning I started with some wind and went into the first song. When the first song ended, I went to a different song and they were starting on different notes. They totally sounded different. So what I did is I faded back into wind, showed some trees blowing and some B-roll, and then I started the second song. And that just helps it flow and you almost don't even notice the transition. Now at the end of that song, I went from a cute folk wedding song to dance party reception song. And for that one, to mask it out, I had the bride throwing her flowers and you actually hear the cheer from everyone around. And the cheer is when the song ends and it masks out the beginning of the next song too. So you totally are just immersed in the video. It's roots under you and me. And you forget that it's switching from the slow to a faster song. You don't really notice it. I'm done for the day. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this is helpful and I'll see you next time.